at Romans, and I'm trying to do this quick in between rain showers. It's just stopped raining, but I reckon it's just started to rain actually. We'll carry on anyway. The book of Romans. Romans comes after Acts because Acts ends with Paul in Rome, and obviously this is a letter to the church in Rome. Paul hasn't yet been. He hopes to go there. He's expressing his desire to visit them, but he writes in about AD 57, probably from Corinth, expressing his hope to visit the church in Rome. That's why it starts with loads of greetings and ends with loads of relational stuff as he seeks to build networks with the people he hopes to visit. I often think of the book of Romans as a bit like Paul with the bonnet of a car open. Obviously, cars didn't exist in Paul's day, but what he does is try to explain everything to do with the gospel and how it works. So he starts by basically giving an overview. This is an engine. And then as he goes through the letter, he's exploring different parts and how they all fit together. That's how I see the gospel of the letter to the Romans working. As Paul writes to a church, a small group of believers at the very heart of the Roman Empire, made up of both Jews and Gentiles, trying to help them understand what is this gospel. The overview is there in those verses I've given in the description, there in chapter 1, verses 16 and 17. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power of God for salvation to everyone who has faith, to the Jew first and then to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed through faith, for faith. As it is written, the one who is righteous will live by faith. And then what he does until we get to the kind of end of chapter 15 is take it all apart and show us how it works, splitting up those two verses into different parts. So the first bit, from the rest of chapter 1 all the way through to the end of chapter 4, he's talking about the gospel, what it is, that God steps in to do what we were unable to do for ourselves and saves us through Jesus Christ. And then in chapters 5 through to the end of chapter 8, he talks about how this gives us the power of God for salvation. He explores the power of God for salvation and what it means to be united in the death and the resurrection of Jesus, and what it means to be united with the Spirit of God, the promise of future glory. And then in the next section, in chapters 9 to 11, he goes on to explore how this is for everyone. Remember, he's writing to a community, a mixed community there at the heart of the Roman Empire. This isn't just for Jewish people, neither is it just for Gentile people. Neither of you can boast and lord it over one another. No, this is for everyone. Gentiles, you're grafted into the promises made to the Jews, and Jews, this is being expanded to include all people. It's not just your special possession. And then he goes on in the rest of the letter before those final greetings. So from chapters 12 through to 15 to explore what's the significance of all of this? What's the consequences of all of this? How does it work out in our daily living? What does it mean to live by faith? That's what Christ has made possible through the gospel, through justification, getting us right with God. Now that we're right with God, saved into something, what is that something? How does it work in our daily lives? So 4 sections. The first is the how. The second is the significance of all of this. The third is the who. And the fourth is the consequences of all of this. It's the, if you like, Paul's masterpiece. It's a working out in more detail of everything that he's going to touch on in the letter to the Galatians. Why it comes now in the New Testament is because it's the longest, and the books in the New Testament, as well as following on from Paul being in Rome, it's also the longest of his letters, and it's, if you like, the fullest expression of his theology of the gospel. What is this expression? Well, it's all about the how, the significance, the who, and the consequences. 16 chapters worth reading to get a handle on what is this gospel. And if you haven't got time for the full 16 chapters, read those 2 verses. That's his summary. This is the power, the good news of the gospel. This is what God has made possible. Receive it and allow it to energize your life, not just now, but for all of eternity, as your life is hid with Christ. Justification by faith. It's amazing. Read the book of Romans.